We're here today with the American journalist Rosenblatt, who has been writing for over 30 years for some of the greatest American papers, such as the Time, the New York Times, the Washington Post, a lot of newspapers,
Time
right?
magazine.
Time magazine as well. So today he's presenting his book, last book, Making Toast, a family story, now translated in Italian by Nutrimenti as Una Nuova Vita. So let's start from the English title of your book, which is Making Toast. So in the book you describe like your and your wife's new life after your daughter Tammy's death. And so you move from your place to live with your son-in-law and your grandchildren. And this new life involves for you now mainly a granddad, right? A very specific early morning ritual, making toast. You perform this act with such a surgical precision, as it were some sort of ritual, right? Is this repetitive gesture actually a ritual of grieving, and also can writing itself be a ritual of grieving?
It's a very good question. To be sure, it was a ritual to keep the family going. Repetitive things in a family are a very good idea, even if they're inconsequential, just so that the children particularly get used to patterns. Children like patterns, they like regular things. As a ritual of grieving is a very subtle question. I don't know is the answer. It may have been unconscious in my mind that I wanted to keep life going. When our daughter died, it brought us to our knees. We couldn't believe it. We didn't think we'd go on. And then, like all people, we stand up. So, and we had people who were responsible for it, these little ones. Once you have done that, all the idea of rituals of grieving may be submerged that you don't even understand. But they were, I think it's a very astute question, because if asked at the time, it probably was just that, a ritual of grieving.
Thank you. So, at a certain point in the book, your grandson Sammy, is that grandson? Right?
Sammy, yes, Sammy.
Gives you a book to read him aloud. The title of the book is Lifetimes, the beautiful way to explain death to children.
Yes.
I'd like to say that your book is instead a beautiful way to explain death to adults, right?
Thank you.
You say that children have no respect for sequential thought, and this disoriented you. How did this continuous dialogue with your grandchildren and their way of thinking influence your thinking on death and on life?
I try to avoid abstract subjects with the children on thinking about death or life. First of all, I don't think children like abstractions. They like that tree and that camera and that woman, and they understand those things, and I like that myself. I'd rather have life in a concrete way. One reason I wanted to avoid it generally is that I didn't want their lives to be consumed with death. I wanted them to think about, as insofar as was possible, their lives now. It was easier on the two older children because they had known my daughter as a mother. Little James, then called Bubbies. Little James was 14 months, So he did not know his mother. And I think of that today, by the way, of every time James acts up or James seems unhappy, I remind myself he never knew his mother, and it was an important thing. But as for that book with Sammy, it was in the house, and why not read it? But honestly, I think he knew more about death than the book.
Yeah. So, back in 1983, your documentary Children of War was widely read and appreciated. You traveled to Northern Ireland, Israel, Lebanon, and Thailand, Hong Kong, and to tell the stories of children growing up in war zones. So, in Making Toast, you're dealing with children as well, but in a completely different situation setting. So, who are children for Rosenblatt?
Well, the Children of War story was a kind of accident. It's another very probing question. I saw on television on the news an Iraqi child standing in the rubble in one of the interminable wars between Iraq and Iran. And he wasn't injured at all. There was no sign of blood or anything. He was just wailing in a kind of symbolic crying for all children and all people who were lost in a war situation. So it appealed to me, and I thought I would go around the world and do this. Then, by terrible accident, I was writing about children again. And this is an indirect way of answering your question, because I'm sort of childish myself. So I do understand children. I think I do understand children and appreciate children. You know, Picasso said he spent all his life trying to draw as well as a 3-year-old child. And there's something to this, you know. Accidentally or not, I gravitate. I just finished a novel in which I was writing about a child, coincidentally, not a young child, a 15-year-old. But I like the idea of seizing life as it is being formed. And in the case of my grandchildren, of course, trying to help it. In the case of a fictional character, just trying to watch it and see how life applies to the young as they get ossified into age.
American journalism has a long tradition of non-fiction novels, right? Many American journalists turn out to be great novelists as well, even if almost none of them actually wrote autobiography. So how did your training in journalism influence your writing, and as a novelist, and especially your writing in this book?
If every questioner in America were as good as you, all the authors would fall on their face.
Thank you.
The thing is, I really wasn't a great journalist. I was, you know, I had what is called a catbird seat in American, which means I was up there, and they allowed me to do what I wanted to do. I always wanted to be a serious writer, not really a journalist, but I liked it because I could tell a story. And so I learned to tell a story through reality. That Children of War story, I went around the world just watching. And mi piace observare popoli tutti tempo. And so when I look at people, I like to see if I can see the real person and then maybe make something up. But it wasn't a difficult transition between journalism and fiction.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Roger Rosenblatt, and buon festival a tutti.